All right, today we are diving into one of the biggest and honestly one of the weirdest financial crimes of the 21st century. I mean, we're talking about a story that has it all: hacking, darknet markets, buried gold, and a fortune worth billions of dollars. So let's just start with the headline number. Get this. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice announced the largest single financial seizure in its entire history. And that number? A staggering $3.6 billion. And all of it was in cryptocurrency. So that's the real question, right? How on earth did they track down billions of dollars in supposedly anonymous Bitcoin years after it was stolen? You know, the story of how they unraveled this whole thing, it really tells you everything you need to know about both the promise and the peril of crypto. Okay, so our story really gets going back in August 2016. A hacker managed to breach a major crypto exchange called Bitfinex. And we're not talking about a simple hack. They used some really sophisticated methods to get around the multi-signature security and ended up authorizing more than 2,000 fraudulent transactions. So the hacker gets away with almost 120,000 Bitcoin. Now, back then, that was a huge deal, but not totally unheard of. But then, Bitcoin's price just went through the roof. And suddenly, that $71 million problem ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar problem. And then, for years, nothing. The trail just went completely cold. So, you're probably picturing who's behind this, right? Some shadowy international syndicate, a team of super hackers? Nope, not even close. It was a New York couple, a tech entrepreneur named Ilya Lichtenstein, who, by the way, was later fingered as the original hacker, and his wife, Heather Morgan. And she wasn't just anyone. She was a contributor to Forbes and, get this, an aspiring rapper who called herself Razzlekhan. So for years, Lichtenstein and Morgan used this incredibly complex, multi-step process to try and launder the stolen billions. It's like a playbook for how not to get caught. First, they created a bunch of fake identities to open new accounts. Then, they used computer programs to automate thousands of tiny little transactions, hoping to fly under the radar. After that, they did something called chain hopping, basically swapping the Bitcoin for other, more private cryptocurrencies to muddy the waters. And finally, they used the infamous darknet market alphabet as a kind of mixer to really try and break that transaction trail for good. And what's just wild about all this is the mix of super high-tech and bizarrely old-school methods they used. On one hand, they're converting crypto into physical gold coins, which Heather Morgan then literally buried in the ground. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Lichtenstein was even traveling to places like Ukraine to swap crypto for stacks of cash. And they even dabbled in buying NFTs and, as we're about to see, a whole lot of prepaid gift cards. It was a real kitchen sink approach. But here is the absolute key to this whole thing. The one detail that ultimately unraveled their entire plan: crypto isn't really anonymous. You see, every single transaction, from the second it was stolen, was permanently stamped onto a public ledger called the blockchain. It's better to think of it as pseudonymous, right? Your real name isn't there, but your unique wallet address is. And that, well, that makes all the difference. So these elite teams from the IRS and the FBI, they didn't have to crack a physical safe or anything like that. They just had to follow the money. And by using these incredible cutting-edge blockchain intelligence tools, they could actually trace the digital currency's every move right through all those complicated laundering schemes. And this chart here gives you a little taste of the digital maze they built. You can see how the funds move from that first wallet, get chopped up and funneled through Alphabet, and then just explode out into dozens of new accounts. The whole point was just to make a transaction history so tangled and confusing that nobody could ever possibly follow it. But after all that incredibly sophisticated, high-tech digital laundering, you know what helped crack the case? A simple $500 Walmart gift card. I'm not kidding. Investigators managed to trace a tiny, tiny fraction of the stolen money to a gift card purchase. And that card, it was used to buy personal stuff that was delivered straight to Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan's home address. Oof. So that gift card was a huge link, for sure. But it only pointed to a tiny sliver of the cash. The investigators still needed the master key, so to speak, to unlock the rest of the fortune, which was just sitting there in the original hacker's wallet. And you will not believe this. That key, the digital password to $3.6 billion, it wasn't stored on some offline, super secure, air-gapped computer that's totally disconnected from the internet. You think it would be, right? Nope. It was stored somewhere accessible from pretty much anywhere on the planet with an internet connection. It was in the hacker's own cloud storage account. I mean, after getting a search warrant, investigators got access to Ilya Lichtenstein's personal cloud drive. It's like a bank robber writing the vault combination down in a diary they leave on a park bench. Just an unbelievable mistake.
And inside that cloud account, bam, they found the smoking gun. It was a decrypted file. And that file had a spreadsheet with the private keys to all the addresses holding that stolen Bitcoin. It was the digital master key to the entire fortune.
And with those keys in hand, authorities took direct control of the remaining 94,000 Bitcoin. Just like that. This one file led directly to the largest government seizure of funds in history. It was a stunning end to a 6-year-long chase. So, look, this is more than just a wild true crime story. It's a really important case because it's a perfect example of how these huge crypto blowups actually force regulators to step in and start making rules, shaping the future of digital money. I mean, if you look at the timeline, the pattern is crystal clear. You had the Mt. Gox collapse back in 2014, and that pushed Japan to create some of the first crypto exchange laws. Then you have this case, the Bitfinex hack, which really pushed the US to build up its crypto tracing powers. And, of course, the more recent FTX collapse just threw gas on the fire for a global push for real comprehensive rules. It really seems like crisis is what drives regulation in this space. And this really brings us to the big debate that's happening right now. Here in the US, regulators are basically trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. They're applying old financial laws to this brand new technology. And that's leading to these big fights over whether crypto is a security or a commodity. The EU, though, is taking a totally different approach. They're writing a whole new playbook from scratch, this framework called MiCA that's designed specifically for crypto. So where does that leave us? Well, I think this case proves two things. First, that even the most ridiculously complex digital crimes can eventually be solved. But it also shows that for every new financial innovation, a new kind of crime and a new headache for regulators is probably just around the corner. Because while crime is always going to evolve with technology, this story proves that that digital trail, no matter how faint you think it is, can eventually lead right back to your front door, and maybe even a Walmart delivery.